In this lesson, we're going to learn how to add and subtract radicals. Now, in order to add and subtract, we have to keep in mind on how to simplify radicals. So when I look at adding and subtracting radicals, it is the same concept as adding or subtracting like terms. In that, in order to combine like terms, we have to have the same variable. So for example, if we have 5x plus 3x, we can combine these by adding the coefficients because they have the exact same variable. So we would get 8x. The same is true for adding and subtracting radicals. So let's take a look at 5 times the square root of 2 plus 3 times the square root of 2. They have the same radicand. We have the same index and understood 2. So all we have to do is combine the coefficients. And here we're going to get 8 roots of 2, and 2 is simplified, so we're good to go. Now let's take a look at 2 cube roots being combined. We have the same radicand. We have 3 as an index, so we simply combine 8 minus 3 to get 5 times the cube root of 2. Our third example, the coefficient out front is understood -1, so I'm going to write that in. We have 7w, and 7w is the radicand, so we're going to combine -1 plus 4. That gives us 3 times the square root of 7w. And our last example together, we have the radicand 10ab and 10ab. There's an understood +1 here as my coefficient. So we're going to combine our coefficients and we get -5 times the square root of 10ab. Now you pause the video, and like always, when we come back, we will do these together. Okay, number 1, we're going to combine -2 and 7. And so we have 5 roots of 3. We have an understood -1 and a -5. So that combined gives me -6 times the square root of 7a. We have a 5 times 6, the square root of 6m, minus 1 times the square root of 6m. So altogether we have 4 square roots of 6m. In our last example, -8 plus 12 gives us 4 times the square root of 2xy. And let's move on to look at some expressions where it looks as though we cannot combine. So before you just say, oh, these can't be combined, we notice that they can be simplified. So once we simplify them, maybe we can combine them. So let's simplify the square root of 8, which is going to be 4 times 2. And then we have 9 times 2. And then we have 4 times 6. So here we're going to take the square root of 4. We get 2 times the square root of 2 minus 3 times the square root of 2 plus 2 times the square root of 6. So we can see that these first two terms can be combined. So 2 minus 3 is -1 times the square root of 2 plus 2 times the square root of 6. So don't force it and try to make it happen. This is your final answer. Okay, let's take a look at one more example together. We have 4 times 3 to give us the 12. We have 16 times 3 to give us the 48. And we have 4 times 5 to give us the 20. I'm going to take the square root. So I get 2 times the square root of 3 plus the square root of 16 is 4 times this 2 is 8 times the square root of 3 minus 2 times the square root of 5. So again, we can't combine them all, so we'll just combine what we can, and we get 10 times the square root of 3 minus 2 times the square root of 5. Okay, pause the video, and when we come back, we'll go over these. Number 1, we have 3, and we're going to break down 12 into 4 times 3. 27 is 9 times 3. Plus 5 times 16 times 3. So I can see that I'm going to have a common radicand in all these. So the square root of 4 is 2. We get 6 times the square root of 3 minus 3 times the square root of 3 plus 4 times the 5 is 20. Square roots of 3 combining. So I get 6 minus 3 is 3. 3 plus 20 is 23. times the square root of 3. Number 2, we have the understood -1. We break down 18 into 9 times 2, plus we break down 32. Not 4 and 8, that works, but the better one is going to be 16 times 2 minus 3 times, and we have 4 times 2. I'm going to take the square root of 9 times the negative. I'm going to take the square root of 16, which is 4. I'm going to take the square root of this 4, which is 2 times the -3. And we have all the same radicand. So I get -3 plus 4 is 1. 1 minus 6 is -5 square roots of 2. Okay, now let's take a look at when we have radicals of variables. So again, it has to be the exact same radicand in order to combine. So I'm going to break this down into 4 times 2 times a squared minus 9 times 2 times a squared plus 4 times 6 times a squared. And now let's take the square root. So the square root of 4 is 2. The square root of a squared is a root 2 minus 3a root 2 plus 2a root 6. So we have the same radicands here and here. So we're going to combine my 2a and the minus 3a gives us 1 negative 1a times the square root of 2 plus 2a times the square root of 6. Okay, let's take a look at some radicals with variables, and we have fractional coefficients. So I have 1/2. We're going to break down 32c to the third into 16 times 2 times c squared times c minus 2/3. Break down 72. 9 and 8 will work, but it's not the best choice. So let's do 36 times 2, c squared times c plus 3/4. And this time we have 100 times 2 times c squared times c. We take the square root of 16, which is 4. 1/2 of 4 is 2. I'm going to take the square root of c squared, which is c. So I have 2c left as my radicand minus the square root of 36 is 6. So I have 2/3 times 6. I can cross simplify. 3 goes in 6 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4, and it was minus. Then I take the square root of c squared, which is c, and then I have 2c as my radicand, plus 3/4 times this radical. So the square root of 100 is 10. So I'm going to say 3/4 times 10. I'm going to cross simplify, and I'm going to divide each of these by 2. 3 times 5 is 15. Over the 2 times the understood 1 is 2. I'm going to take the square root of c squared, which is c. And then we're left with radical 2c. So now we're going to combine 2c minus 4c and this rational 15 over 2c. So we know 2 minus 4 is going to be -2. So we have -2 plus 15 over 2. I'm going to rewrite -2 so it has a denominator of 2 so we can combine. So that is going to be 4. Whoops, let's erase that. Let's give some space here. Okay. Remember, we're not using calculators in this section, so you will have some scratch work. So our common denominator is 2, and we get -4 is our numerator here, plus 15 over 2. And then we combine these, and we get a positive 11 over 2. So 11 over 2, and it was AC times 2C. So bringing in a lot of skills with this problem. A lot of skills from 6th and 7th grade as well. Okay, pause the video. You try these. When we come back, we'll go over them together. Okay, the square root of 80 is going to be 16 times 5 times d squared minus, we have 4 times 5 times d squared And this equal sign should be on the outside here, not underneath. And so here we have 4 times d and another d, so that's d squared. And we're left with the square root of 5 minus the square root of 4 is 2. And then we have the square root of d squared, which is d. And we take the square root of this d squared, so we have another d. And then we have 5 as our radical. So we're going to combine 4d squared minus 2d squared. So that's simply 2d squared, only combining your coefficients here. And then we have radical 5. And number 2, we have the understood -1, 4 times 7 times c squared times c, plus 9 times 7 times c squared times c. The square root of 4 is 2, so that's -2c. And then we are left with 7c as our radical. We have plus the square root of 9 is 3. The square root of c squared is c. And we're left with radical 7c. So -2c plus positive 3c is positive 1c times the square root of 7c. Okay, let's do our last problem. And just remember, perimeter is adding all the sides of your shape. So this little mark tells me that these two sides are equivalent. And now we're just going to add all sides. So what I'm going to do is simplify just right here in my picture. And so this is going to be 36 times 3 times m squared times m. So this gives me 6m radical 3m. So this was a perfect square and this is a perfect square. So I have 2 of those. And now 75m cubed is going to be broken down into 25 times 3 times m squared times m. And so here we have 5m times the square root of 3m. So we're just adding this measurement, and this measurement. So our coefficients, 6 and 6 is 12, and 5 more is 17m times the radical 3m. So just remember, when you're adding and subtracting, the radicands must be the same in order to combine, and then you're only combining your coefficients.